This is Fountain
Every
Street
week I find
Church.
it hard to find the best ones, but somehow, like I said, you'll hear what I'm trying to say even when the words
Here,
are
we strive to free the mind, grow the soul, and change the world. Here, there is freedom to doubt and freedom to believe. Here, you can find a house of prayer for all people.
the swallow up Jonah.
Welcome to Fountain Street Church. Join us on the journey.
I'm of an age, though, where I can remember a recording, not a performance, of the late, great Paul Robeson, who made that his signature song when it came out. I was reading today, just by accident, thank you, Marky, about Paul Robeson, who was notorious in some eyes and heroic in others. He was a graduate of Rutgers University, where he lettered 15 times and was Phi Beta Kappa, went to Columbia Law School, and on one of the first days he was in his firm there in New York, he asked the secretary in to take dictation. She was white and refused to take it. He stopped practicing law and never went back, and became a great actor and a great singer and a great activist. So in some respects, thank you to that racist secretary. We never know when gifts may come from the most unlikely and unwelcome of sources. And of course, I'm thinking of Paul Robeson today, among others, like A. Philip Randolph. It is, in fact, Labor Day, and we forget that the struggle for racial justice is also the struggle for worker justice. Because for a lot of folks, especially people of color, to have a job was hard. To have one that had dignity and security was harder yet. And A. Philip Randolph was just one leader among many. And it did make me think, as I was pondering this weekend, what I could say after all. I'm a suit. I got 3 degrees. I'm at the top of the labor food chain. But let me tell you another story. My last day was my best day 37 years ago, just as my first day was the worst day. The other men and boys waved, smiled, laughed, teased as I walked away from the rail yard for the last time. "Yo, Deacon," said a wiry old man with a cigar in his mouth. "Do good." And so ended my summer working as a track hand on the Central Vermont Railway in 1975. A short summer season as what they used to call a gandy dancer, but was in truth little more than a ditch digger. This being Labor Day weekend, work is on my mind, and I mean physical work, the kind that demands, as my title says, that you put your back into it. One of the readings in synagogue this week, as you heard, contains language about working people. You shall not abuse a needy and destitute laborer, whether a fellow countryman or a stranger. That same passage is then referred to in the Christian scriptures later in the book of Luke and Timothy, and you can hear it quoted in that wonderful, now 50-year-old movie called The Lilies of the Field. Remember that? That was wonderful. And Homer Smith, the character, tries to negotiate with a bunch of German nuns living in the southwestern United States about whether or not he should be paid to build them a chapel. And their language being poor, they're being mostly German and he being entirely American, they negotiate by referring to passages of Scripture, which they each have, one in German and one in English. And so he looks at a space in Luke and comments where Luke says that the laborer is worthy of his hire, reflecting back on Deuteronomy, to which the sister, who had a sense of humor as well as a bad attitude, pointed him toward Matthew, where it says, "See the lilies of the field, they toil not, neither do they reap," and so they negotiated. And he does end up building the chapel in the heat of the American desert. And if you remember the movie, at least in the story, it was hard, dusty, back-breaking work, but he did it. Of course, we're told today we live in an information economy. Everything is about high technology and computers and all that stuff, that the work of the future will be about brains more than brawn, and maybe that's true, but I'm wondering whether we're overlooking or perhaps even avoiding the reality that most work Most of the truly vital work that must be done is still work done with hands, with backs, with bodies, with legs, and that without it, none of the computers, none of the embassies, none of the financial planners, none of the life coaches, none of them would be able to function. My first day as a track hand, I did not have that nickname. All they knew was that I was one of the summer gang, the kids that are hired usually right out of college to work for the few months of warm weather in Vermont when you can actually repair the track that gets worn up and torn up over the winter. So I had brand new leather gloves and a brand new hat just like those engineers wore, and we were all fresh fish for all those old grizzled men with their gray hair and pot bellies, all the year-rounders. And they smiled wicked, exploitative smiles, and they handed us shovels and herded us out into the yard, into the rail yard, because you see, our work was to repair all that track in the very short space of 3 or 4 months. You know, we did have a few machines that did some work, but 37 years ago, mostly it was men and mostly it was shovels. Now, I've got to tell you how this happens, so you got a flavor for the bodily work that at least I remember, and I remember it quite vividly. You start to repair track by pulling the spikes. You know what the spikes are? They hold the rail to the tie. Those are those long things you occasionally see in your yard from time to time. And what you get is a very long claw hammer-like thing. It's a long lever with a little claw at the bottom, and you push it down and out pops a spike. Well, that's what happens when an old man does it, but a young kid, you push down and all you get is push back. And so I learned how to leverage the spikes out slowly. Some of them would pop out easily. Some would hang there for the longest time, and you'd have to jimmy them. Now, after the spike puller, which released the rail from the tie, came the jackasses, and that's a technical term.